Last Christmas, I set the table for three, me, my son, and his wife. I even wore the red dress my husband loved. But instead of a knock on the door, I got a card in the mail. No apology. Just a line. Hope you understand. I understood perfectly. I was no longer needed. But what they didn't know was that my late husband had planned for this exact moment. He had left me something powerful. And when my son came crawling back, thinking I was still the fragile old woman he abandoned, I gave him a gift he'd never forget. I sat at the table long after the roast had turned to rubber and the candles burned down to nubs. The red dress felt ridiculous now, like I was playing pretend in someone else's fantasy. And for what? My son couldn't even pick up the phone to lie to me properly. No voice. No excuse. Just a mass-produced card and a cold assumption that I'd simply understand. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at the flickering lights on the tree, thinking how ironic it was that I'd strung them up to make the house feel warm, and now all they did was spotlight how utterly empty it was. It wasn't just the absence of Andrew and Brooke that hurt. It was the realization that I'd been slowly erased from their lives. They didn't forget me. No, forgetting would have been kinder. They chose to exclude me. I wasn't a priority anymore. I was a checkbox on a list that could be skipped. After about an hour, I forced myself to pack up the dinner into Tupperware. I'd drop it off at the community shelter the next morning. Maybe someone would be hungry enough not to care that it wasn't piping hot. I sat in Henry's old recliner and rocked gently, the house so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking like it was mocking me. I looked over to his photo on the mantel, him in that old fishing hat, laughing at something I'd probably said. God, I missed him. Not just for the companionship, but for the way he made me feel seen. He never would have let this happen. But even as that thought crossed my mind, I felt something, a pull, almost like a whisper. You see, Henry was the kind of man who planned ahead. Always kept a backup key, always wrote reminders on the calendar. The kind of man who thought of everything, even what would happen to me if he wasn't around. I remembered something, then. A conversation we had during one quiet winter night 2 years before he passed. He said, "Mabel, if anything ever happens to me, go check the garden shed. Not right away. When you feel like you need a reason to keep going." I never asked him what he meant. But that night, with nothing left but cold leftovers and a broken heart, I went outside into the snow, flashlight in hand, and opened that old shed door. And what I found changed everything. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Andrew and Brooke were stressed. Maybe something unexpected came up with her family. Maybe they didn't mean to hurt me. I held on to that hope like it was a lifeline, because the alternative was too painful to face. But then, Mrs. Hartley, my neighbor across the street, stopped by. She's the kind who notices everything, especially from her kitchen window. "I hope the party went well," she said with a smile. I blinked, confused. "What party?" She looked startled. "Oh, I just assumed you were there. I saw your son and his wife pulling up with a car full of groceries and balloons last week. Christmas Eve, I think. Looked like they were having a whole gathering. Guests were arriving all evening." My stomach sank. "They didn't even come inside?" I asked, still clinging to the last string of denial. "No," she replied softly. "They had the music up pretty loud. Laughter, dancing. Quite a celebration." She meant well, but her words felt like a dagger. I thanked her, smiled politely, and closed the door. Then I sat down on the floor, right there in the entryway, and let it all fall apart. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't been busy. They hadn't made a mistake. They had deliberately chosen to leave me out. I wasn't part of their image anymore. Their curated, Instagram-perfect life didn't have room for a gray-haired widow with soft hands and too many casseroles. I didn't fit the brand. I was just background noise. I cried. Quietly. Not the kind of tears you sob out, but the kind that leak out because your body can't carry the weight anymore. And in the middle of that grief, I heard Henry's voice again. Not out loud, but in my memory, clear as day. One day, he had said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table as we signed paperwork, people may disappoint you, Mabel, even those you love most. But if that day ever comes, I'll make sure you're never left with nothing. At the time, I thought he was just being poetic, protective. I hadn't asked what he meant, because I didn't think I'd need to know. But now I needed to know. The shed. That odd comment he made 2 winters ago. I bundled up again, stepped back out into the cold, and marched through the snow to that rickety wooden shed out by the garden. The lock was old but familiar. Henry's childhood tackle-box key still worked like a charm. Inside, under a tarp and a stack of dusty seedling trays, I found it, a metal box. Heavy, taped shut, and when I opened it, my entire life turned on its head. My hands trembled as I held the deed. Pine Hollow. Just reading the name brought the scent of pine needles and hot cocoa to my memory. That quiet little town tucked away in the mountains, where Henry and I had danced barefoot in the snow behind a bed and breakfast. I hadn't thought about that place in years. But Henry had. Quietly, privately, he had planned for the day I might need an escape. A home. A way out. A way forward. The trust fund documents were crisp and clear. He'd set everything up 5 years ago. A generous account, over $700,000, in my name only. Use it if the world ever makes you feel small, the note said. You don't owe anyone an explanation for starting over. I sat with the box in my lap for hours. Half of me still clung to the idea that maybe I should confront Andrew. Demand answers. Look him in the eye and make him see what he had done to his own mother. But the other half, the stronger half, was done begging to be seen. Henry didn't raise me to be pitiful. He loved me with too much care, too much foresight, to let me grow old waiting for scraps of affection from people who only called when they needed something. The next morning, before the sun rose, I brewed one last pot of coffee in that kitchen. The house was still, every corner filled with echoes of holidays past. But I didn't feel haunted anymore. I felt ready. I packed my things carefully. Took only what I truly loved. My photo albums, Henry's favorite sweater, the silver locket he gave me the night Andrew was born. Everything else, I left behind. Let them come back to a house full of furniture but empty of warmth. I left a single envelope on the dining room table. Inside, a short note in my handwriting. I'm safe. I need time. Mom. No forwarding address. No phone number. No explanations. Just distance. By noon, I was halfway up the mountain roads, alone in Henry's old station wagon. The trees began to change, bare branches giving way to towering evergreens. The air grew colder, cleaner. Pine Hollow was still 3 hours away, but for the first time in months, my lungs felt light. That evening, I arrived at the cabin. Warm lights. A fire already stacked in the hearth. Familiar quilts folded neatly on the bed. He had furnished it himself, I could tell. His quiet love was in every corner. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, then stepped inside. No ghosts. No guilt. Just a beginning. 6 months in Pine Hollow felt like a lifetime reborn. I repainted the shutters a cheerful yellow, planted lavender by the front porch, and turned my tiny kitchen into a pie haven. The locals welcomed me like I was one of their own, small-town kindness that didn't ask questions. I taught the quilting ladies how to make chess pie, and in return, they showed me how to live without apology. Jasper, my 3-legged mutt with a heart of gold and a snore like a freight train, became my shadow. He didn't care who had abandoned me. He just cared that I fed him twice a day and let him nap in my lap. We healed together. Then July came. One hot, sticky afternoon, As I was bringing in a peach cobbler from the oven, a car I didn't recognize crawled up the gravel drive. Sleek, black, and out of place. I didn't need to squint. I knew. Andrew stepped out. He looked thinner, older. His shirt clung to him with the sweat of discomfort, not from the heat, but from the shame. Brooke was slouched in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, arms crossed tight like she was allergic to humility. "Mom," he said, voice cracking with fake cheer. "We were in the area." They were never in the area. Pine Hollow was 2 hours from any city they'd deigned to live in. I opened the door, smiled sweetly. "Come in. You look thirsty." He didn't waste time. Didn't even pretend to ask how I was. Over lukewarm tea and stale conversation, the truth spilled out. He'd been laid off 6 months ago. Brooke's online shop went belly up. Their savings? Gone. Their rental? Eviction notice served. "We just need a little help." "A loan," he said. "Temporary." I nodded, sipped my tea, and said, "Of course. I've actually been expecting this." His brows furrowed. I reached for the manila folder I'd prepared weeks earlier, because deep down, I knew. I always knew he'd come knocking the moment his fortune dried up. He opened the folder. His eyes scanned the pages. Photocopies of checks, transaction logs, and account statements showing every penny he'd siphoned from Henry before he passed. $80,000. "You got your inheritance early," I said gently. "Dad made sure of that. Hope you understand." Andrew's face drained of color like a balloon losing air. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, from the car, Brooke slammed her door and stomped up the path. She snatched the folder from him, scanned the contents, and hissed, "You idiot! You told me we'd get everything." And just like that, she turned around and left him standing there. No tearful goodbyes. No second chances. Just silence, and the sound of Jasper's tail thumping against the floor. Just when I thought it was over, just when the silence felt like peace, a new envelope arrived. Legal papers. Brooke was petitioning for guardianship over me. She claimed I was mentally unfit to care for myself, that I was confused, erratic, and a danger to my own safety. The woman who hadn't called me once in 6 months now wanted full legal control over my life, over my money. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my teacup. But make no mistake, I didn't underestimate her. Brooke wasn't reckless. She was strategic, ruthless. She'd spun a story of a poor, senile old woman living in isolation, possibly being manipulated by strangers. She even included screenshots of social media posts I'd made with Jasper and my quilting group, suggesting I was being exploited by mountain hippies. It would have been comical if it weren't so vile. Luckily, I had Rose. Rose lived 2 cabins down. Silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and a sharp legal mind that hadn't dulled one bit since retiring from her career as a defense attorney. When I showed her the papers, she raised one brow and said, "Oh honey, we're going to eat them alive." We built our case like a fortress. Medical records proving my mental and physical health. Letters from my doctor, therapist, and even the town librarian. Video recordings of me leading workshops and organizing fundraisers for the local animal shelter. A testimony from the mayor himself, who said Pine Hollow wouldn't be half as cozy without me. We walked into that courtroom like it was a garden party. The judge barely needed 10 minutes. He read through the evidence, gave Brooke a long, cold look, and said, "This is not just baseless, it's insulting. Motion denied. Case dismissed. Permanently." Outside the courthouse, I found Andrew and Brooke waiting by the steps. She looked furious. He looked nothing. Just hollow. I walked up to them, looked them both in the eyes, and said, "You had a choice. You could have loved me. You could have respected me. But instead, you left me alone on Christmas, then tried to take what wasn't yours. And now, you've lost me. They didn't argue, didn't apologize, just turned and walked away, swallowed by the parking lot like ghosts. And that was the last I saw of them. This year, my cabin is glowing with warmth again. I'm baking pies, setting the table, lighting candles. But this time, the seats are for the people who truly see me, the women from my quilting group, the man who delivers firewood and always brings Jasper a treat, the teens I helped with scholarships from the rescue fund Henry left me. Not blood, but chosen family. Real love. No conditions. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't about confrontation, it's about reclaiming your peace. It's choosing to build a life where love is mutual, respect is real, and your worth isn't questioned. I didn't need to scream or fight. I just needed to walk away and thrive. If you've ever been cast aside by the people you trusted most, know this: your story doesn't end in their silence. It begins in your strength. Share your own journey in the comments. Let's talk about what family should be, and how healing doesn't always come from apologies, but from starting over. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit subscribe. We share powerful stories of justice, resilience, and hope every single week.